Um, so this is the second time I'm recording this. The first time my camera app crashed. So I'm just going to start off with a brief overview of my views really quick and then move on to talk about how they all work together. Firstly, I'm a Western metaphysicist when it comes to what's going on with the world. This is the idea that there's a lot of individualist, I think is a better title for it, but there's a lot of stuff in the world and it's all its own unique thing. Something has to be a unique thing. It can't be a modification of a thing. It can't be a collection of things. It also can't be a stuff. That one is a little bit more confusing, but it's the idea like water, iron, those kind of things. It also can't be a universal. Like this book is an individual object because it's my book, but the Seven Deadly Sins sampler is not an individual object. That's a universal. So an object or an event, not an event can't be an individual thing for obvious reasons. This one, individualism just seems to be the most reasonable option available. I believe this for a pretty simple reason. It's just the other option, they're not good. Metaphysical nihilism isn't even really worth mentioning. It's just not a good idea. It just really seems like there's more than one thing in the world. And monism is undesirable because not only do I want to be my own unique thing, it just seems that monism also kind of leads into idealism, and I hate idealism. And also, physicalism just seems to be individualism seems to be the thing that Occam's razor applies to. Like this lamp, it seems to be its own thing, so I'm just going to trust that it's probably its own thing. Secondly, I adhere to externalism when it comes to externality. There are a few different reasons that I think this, and they're all pretty simple. Occam's razor comes in again and applies here pretty well. Along with that, it just seems to be the best theory out of the available ones. Things exist outside of myself, but sure, some things are mental. Feelings and thoughts are mental. Well, bears and bikes are external. I'm not an idealist, so I believe that physical objects do exist out of my own consciousness. I'm sick of Berkeley, and I reject idealism with a passion. The snowball argument doesn't really make sense. Clearly, there's something in the snowball in addition to the properties of the snowball. The snowball has external stuff that's going on in the physical world, and I don't want to talk anymore about Berkeley, so I'm moving on. External objects exist. I'd like to say that I'm an eternalist when it comes to time, just because that theory is super interesting to me, but I don't think that it doesn't really fit with a crucial part of my metaphysics, so I can't affirm it. Because of that, I'm going to stick with growing block. Growing block is the typical view of time. The past exists, the present becomes the past as it moves on, and the future isn't set yet. Compare this to eternalism, which is the one that I just mentioned, which is the idea that all of time is already set, present, past, future, they're all there. Presentism isn't really worth mentioning. It's clearly the past exists. I'm going to say that time does exist for humanity, but for a different creature like the absolutes or the heptapods from a rival/story of your life, it could potentially look very different. I think that time exists, but yeah, it could function just a little bit differently. I'm taking this idea mainly from the theory of relativity. Relativity seems to cause issues with growing block theory, but I'm not sure if it actually does. If Stephen is moving at light speed, then time works a little bit differently for him. It works slower, compared to me while I'm on Earth using normal time. The present is currently at different times for the two of us. Stephen is going to experience time slower than me, but time still exists for both of us, and the growing block remains a growing block because he doesn't see my future and I don't see his future. Because the future doesn't exist. I move a little bit into Stephen's future, but the second that he pops out of light speed, he's back to the present. So it's a little weird and hard to think about, but I don't think that relativity really is as much of a problem as it seems to be. The A series I think exists, so time does exist. Moving on from time, objective truth also seems to exist. The concept that our assumptions and beliefs don't make up what the world looks like is an important distinction. I believe that the world is round because the world is round, not because I think that it's round. Not the world isn't round because I think it's round. This fits with the rest of my metaphysics pretty well, especially my externalist views on external objects. The argument by anti-realists doesn't really seem very convincing. It doesn't seem that things in the world are mind-dependent and forcing me to kind of side with capital R realism. I'm convinced by the cosmological argument, and that's what the view of the necessary being is kind of based on. A necessary being, call it God, call it the absolute, whatever you want, is most likely the reason, is the most likely the cause for the way that the world exists today. I think it's a necessary truth that the world has to be this way because of its creation, but without the creation, I don't think that the world would exist. I don't think that there's any other universes out there, multiverses, whatever. This is mostly just because of the argument. The best argument I've seen for it comes from Leibniz. I know, the biggest Leibniz shill in all of philosophy. But the way that it works is that our universe is the best mixture of rules and freedom. They both the absolute wants them to both be as high as possible, and the perfect combo is the universe that we're living in now. And there's no reason to create any other ones because this is the perfect one. So I think that the world / the universe was created with discovery not only possible but encouraged. I mean, why else would there be so much cool stuff for us to discover and experience? It's like hiding a secret reference to Star Wars and Indiana Jones, something that only a few people would catch when they look for it, but it's something that encourages those few people to keep doing it and looking for that stuff in other movies. Moving past that, humans are inherently physical. I think that that's a requirement. A person can't exist without a body. I reject dualism. It has too many problems, and the problem of interaction is undeniable. Physicalism entirely ignores that problem, and it doesn't really seem to have very many problems at all. The Descartes' argument that he can conceive of his body not existing doesn't apply. I think that without a body, a human can't exist. There's something about humans that just ties them to their bodies. Moving past physicalism, people are libertarianly free. Not only do I believe this just because it's the morally superior option to the others, but it seems to be the most rational. Determinism seems to be about as rational as libertarianism, but morally it's significantly worse, so I'm going to side with libertarianism. Compatibilism is extremely problematic. It has all of the negatives of determinism and none of the positives, sort of. Essentially, it's just lying about having free will. Libertarianism is the best choice. So now to move into talking about all of the reasons for all of that. A lot of my concepts don't really have problems with each other. Individualism works very well with externalism, and the two of those don't contradict growing block theory at all. Individualism and externalism also agree very well with physicalism. Growing block theory works great with libertarianism. The problem comes when you toss physicalism, the existence of God, libertarianism, and growing block theory together. Physicalism and the existence of God seem to contradict if you take a typical Christian theist view. An omnipotent, all-knowing God seems to contradict growing block, and libertarianism and physicalism seem to contradict as well. So now to try and explain these contradictions. First, physicalism and Christian theism. This one's pretty easily solved. The Hebrew word for soul, nephesh, I think I said that right, translates to life, changing the Christian theistic view by quite a bit. Because of this, there's not that much of an issue. It's kind of just diffused. If someone dies, they're kind of just given their updated body, and that's what works for them through eternity. An all-knowing God kind of seems to contradict the growing block theory, which claims that the future doesn't exist yet. But I don't really know if growing block theory has any problems with an absolute being able to see potential futures, because it only claims that the future doesn't exist. If God, that absolute, is able to see potential futures, then they remain an all-knowing being. So again, this problem is kind of diffused. I've created a problem for myself with the all-knowing God starting to threaten my libertarian free will view. It's here that I make an important distinction. God is able to see potential futures, not the true future, which doesn't disagree with growing block theory, and it doesn't interfere with free will. There is no true future available to see, so God can see the potential tree branches of the future, and that doesn't seem to be a breach of free will. Yeah, he could lead us in directions that would end with us arriving at a spot he wanted, but I'm not sure if that's something that he would do. This question and connection seem to be one of the mysteries, like the problem of interaction for dualism. I don't really have a great answer for it, but I can try to argue for it. Physicalism and free will. Here's an apparent problem. The world seems to be extremely deterministic in nature, with the way that the world itself functions set up in a deterministic way. Yeah, it's a problem. I'm aware, but I think I might have a solution. I'm going to point to Peter Van Inwagen for this one. He claims that physics prove that the quantum mechanical world is highly indeterministic and writes about the indeterministic functions of the human brain. We have agent causation, even if the world around us seems to be determined. Modern physics seems to prove that the world is in fact indeterminate, contrary to normal belief. Along with this, I think that we have to accept a mystery no matter which view of free will we choose to take. And I believe that free will is the least bad mystery and has the best outcome. Physicalism seems to be true in all senses, so libertarianism is kind of the one under fire here. So, yeah, a few things that I've said can be argued against. Dualism could work better with libertarianism and classical theism, but I'm not willing to sacrifice physicalism. Dualism is just too problematic, and it brings up questions of interaction and weird moral questions as well. If dualism is to be believed, the body isn't as important as the monad or the soul. And the body is something that I think is very important to human existence. The biggest issue I see here is my problem between free will and an all-knowing God. I don't really have a great answer to it in response to that problem, but I gave a few answers. I'm not really willing to give up on either of those on either of them because they're both rational assumptions about the way that the world functions. Free will is as necessary to human existence as God is to the Earth's creation, and therein lies my biggest problem. I hope that this kind of made sense, and I hope I didn't go too over the time. If I did, oops, my bad. I figured that you probably don't care that much. It was fun being in class, so I'll see you for a little bit next semester.